Welcome to the Future of Less Work, where we explore how work is transforming one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today we'll take another look at what happens to the concept of employment when talent is no longer tied to a place. Over the past few years, we've removed many of the physical barriers to work. Remote work proved that people don't need to be in the same place to contribute. Technology makes better collaboration possible across time and space. And yet, when it comes to actually hiring, employing, and building teams, many of the old constraints are still very much in place. So, what does it really mean to get the right person in the right job, regardless of where they are? And what needs to change so that we can make that happen? My guest today is Sagar Khatri, CEO of and co-founder of Multiplier, helping organizations navigate what it takes to actually access talent across borders. Sagar, welcome to the Future of Less Work.
Hi, Nirit. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to do this podcast. Hello, everyone. Really, it's a pleasure to be here.
So thank you for joining me. And I want to start by asking you, do you think organizations are really hiring talent wherever it is, regardless of location?
That's a very interesting question to start with, Nirit. I think uh, I would say much better than what it used to be a few years ago. I started Multiplier roughly 5 years ago, and at that point in time, and I started in Singapore. At that point in time, global hiring was still kind of like a foreign concept to people. Your enterprises, your large companies like your Google and Apple, they've been doing it for a very long time because they have the resources and the compliance infra to do it. But in the last 5 years, I would say we have come a long way where these tools are accessible to even smaller and mid-market companies as well to go global, to hire compliantly globally. But would I say it's at a point where a large percent of companies are even aware about it? I would say there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, so I worked for Intel for almost 30 years, and I had led many M&A activities globally. So once upon a time, it was a nightmare, right, to actually
Yeah.
integrate new locations from a legal and compliance standpoint. And I know that that has gotten so much better, right, with capabilities such as yours. But I still wonder what it is that anchors work to location today, even when you can reach out, find the right resource wherever they are in the world, and then figure out all you know, the compliance needs and the back office needs. So what is it?
Uh, uh, you know, let's go 10 years back, right? We talk about being able to find talent very easily. If you go 10 years back, sometimes we live in this bubble where things move so fast, so we take certain things for granted. If you go 10 years back, we had LinkedIn, but it was not, or maybe like 12, 15 years back, we didn't have LinkedIn. People were still posting for job ads on newspapers. And think about where we have come in such a short period of time where we talk about being able to find talent very easily across the globe. So I would say those two or three factors have been defining. One is your proliferation of remote working tools as well, where like back in the day, if you and I wanted to connect, we would be talking on Skype and we barely spoke. That technology didn't work. So ability to find that talent globally, which has come a long way in last 10 years, I would say. Ability to engage with people cross border has come a long way, right, in last 5 to 6 years. And we live in a world where most companies are starting to look internally. I started this company in Singapore where we talk about Singaporeans first. Now I moved to New York earlier this year where we talk about Americans first. So there's this sentiment of, and this is a cycle. I mean, if I'm a keen student of history and life goes through cycles, we are going through one of those cycles where We want to now look internally, and then we'll realize, oh, this doesn't work. We want to go back to globalization. So we are at the cycle of looking internally. And I think these three key factors, which is access to global talent easily, access to or proliferation of remote working tools, and just these, looking internally or deglobalization sentiment is giving rise to not just preference to hire globally or hire people where they are, rather need to hire people where they are. Like if you've seen the H1B
Yeah.
100,000 USD fees, and for an ordinary business, I mean, for large tech, that number doesn't really matter, but for SME business, it's a really sizable sum. Would that impact their hiring strategy? It certainly will. And if I'm going to hire that person in Canada or UK or Colombia or Mexico, that will certainly expose me to the global hiring part of it, where compliance and everything is important. Now, to your part, on the anchoring people to a location. See, global hiring has always existed.
Yes, exactly.
Uh,
And then we've had offshoring, and we've had outsourcing. We've had platform in the last, a little bit over a decade. This, like you said, is not new. It's also really interesting because you're touching on this question: what is global hiring? Is it who's moving? Is it the work to where the people are, or is it the people to where the work is? Are you seeing a change in that?
that's a beautiful expression. Precisely that, and thank you for sharing that. But I'm going to copy that. Where I love that statement. Uh, that is precisely the change that is happening. Global hiring has always been there. Like 50 years ago, 40 years ago, a large US MNC wanted to sell its goods and services to UK, Europe, or Middle East, or wherever. They will go global, right? So it was, they will send their expats to those countries to be able to sell goods and services. Now, definition of globalization has changed from being able to sell goods and services to now accessing talent in that market. And to access talent in that market, I don't need to be a certain size of a company. That's what I was saying. I started Multiplier 5 years ago. Today we have 700 employees across 50 countries, 70 nationalities. If I had to build that team in Singapore, I would be able to do. That's where we came up with this concept of global exchange of work. And that's what we're doing at Multiplier, where what you said, we make sure people don't move for work, but work moves towards people, as you are just now expressing yourself. We want companies to participate in this global exchange of work, where we have set the compliance boundaries and you've trusted laws and we have money movement rails, where now you can access talent, or what you said, access work in any part of the world, being compliant and not worrying about being a certain size and only having capacity to go globally then.
Yeah, so I think what you're basically removing is the operational barriers, right? You're basically saying, okay, if I want to employ somebody in Singapore and I'm sitting in New York and I wouldn't know where to start, and I'm not a big entity and I'm not setting up an office there, you have a solution for me for that one off. I think probably one of the biggest barriers we seem to have for the next wave of really making this possible is operational. And the way people collaborate, the way you manage dispersed teams. Have you seen any progress in that?
It's operational, Nirit, but you'll be surprised. It's a lot psychological too.
Yeah.
In And the platform is so addictive. It's almost like using TikTok. You see one video and you can't stop. So imagine you are a US company. Most of our customers are based in the US. You are a US company, and now suddenly somebody reaches out to you on LinkedIn and they are based in Mexico. And you get on a call with this person, you interview them, and you absolutely love them. But you're like, oh, I don't know about Mexico. I don't want to get fired or I don't want to get caught into laws and, misclassification and so on and so forth. People take compliance very seriously. Now, let's say you figure out a solution for this one off, as you say, and you actually end up indulging or participating in the global exchange of work via companies like Multiplier, and you love it so much, it's so addictive. So the next time another person reaches out to you or anybody in your team from any other country, oh, I know how to do this and this is great. Come, let's do it again. So
Okay, so I'm going to put my HR hat on though, but because the next problem, and you're not solving that one, but it becomes a barrier to growth, is can I figure out how to work with the person in Mexico? And there's the culture, and there's the I manage one person in Mexico and one in the Philippines, and one in Germany, and how do I make that work? And how do I move work around? And I'm wondering, are you seeing the shift from, because what companies used to do is they used to kind of outsource this, right? I mean, I'm going to use the person in Mexico, but I won't hire them because I don't know if that's a long-term relationship. Are you seeing a shift from, independent and gig work to actually employment work?
absolutely. So there are two large shifts that we are seeing. One is, and this is one of the reasons I started Multiplier. Uh, Last decade, I would say, has been really great for the economy, and it continues to be that way. But what we're seeing is more emphasis on full-time employment, where your taxes and 401ks are properly managed and paid for, especially in the world where we live in today. We live in a world where uh, AI has had massive impact and consequences, and your IP has become of significant importance. So now you're seeing that companies, both big and small, are trying to hire that one senior AI engineer or one particular skill set person who can build that particular IP for you. Now, with IP, if you are a gig worker, that IP does not really belong to you. That IP, because as a gig worker, what misclassification laws and everything states that the company does not have the full ownership of how you work, when you work, at what times do you work. And that's what's causing a big shift towards you. I don't like the word ownership, but for the lack of the better word, owning that particular IP, or rather than renting that particular skill set of an employee, owning that skill set of an employee, where you have full ownership. Because in the age of AI, building that product has not is not the moat, or as we call defensibility, anymore. Anybody over a weekend can vibe code that product for you. So what is more important is that one deep insight that you have, one IP that you've built over the course of years, your experience, and you want to own that. The second thing that we are seeing on that shift is more and more, a lot of governments are now. So let me give you an example. This gig economy worked really nicely in the US because they have 1099 and freelancer laws and so on and so forth. What we saw in a lot of emerging countries, gig economy turned out to be a way for folks to not pay their taxes and 401ks. Because as a gig worker, as a freelancer, you are, and they don't have strong laws to make sure those guys pay taxes and so on and so forth. So a lot of these countries which run on your income taxes and your social contributions are now facing shortages of money. So they are enforcing that you're making sure you have companies like Multiplier which collects and pays taxes as well as social security. The other shift we are seeing is what we call north to north search, where you'll be surprised that the most amount of payroll or capital on our exchange today flows to the North America. So a lot
What
of
does that mean? Is that like somebody in New York hiring somebody in San Francisco?
It would be more like somebody in North America hiring in Canada, or Canada in North America, or rest of the world in America. A
Okay.
large trend what you're seeing is companies across the globe want to access the large homogeneous North American market.
Yeah. So
And
you could start your company in Singapore, say, okay, I need my very first sales employee in New York, and then you can hire them without going through all the setting up the entity for in the beginning until you're big enough.
absolutely, because US is people outside America think about US as one country. People who live here, they know it's literally 50 different countries, and sometimes even more, because your payroll calculations, your laws differ state to state. And sometimes I live in New York City, which is different from other parts of the New York state. So, and compliance, and US obviously is very, very enforceable on compliance and so on and so forth. So we are seeing a big surge in what we call not to not surge, where a lot of companies globally are now, with AI, they can build their products faster, but they still need to sell. They need a big market where they can sell, and that's where North America comes into picture.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you basically are pinpointing two AI related trends and how they affect the global talent conversation, right? The first one you said, people are hiring versus contracting because they need the IP that the person is doing as they're working with AI. So it's actually a really interesting conversation, because I started writing about this. I haven't published it yet, but I started writing about this idea of who owns think about the agents, right? That I teach them to be me, right? And I'm cloning myself. So that I can do more work, and and not do the stuff that I don't really care about. And if I do that within a company and then I leave and I come work for somebody else, right? It's like I've left part of me behind. And it's really interesting who owns me, right? Who owns the AI version of me? So it's interesting, because you're saying people are getting hired so that they can retain that. I'm gonna go on record saying I think that that's going to be the next talent war, because I'm not sure once you actually did clone yourself and you move, I'm not sure you'd be willing to leave all that behind. That's going to be a really interesting one to follow. So thank
That's
you
a
for
very
highlighting.
interesting thought. I have not thought about it. It's such an interesting thought. I'm looking forward to reading that piece whenever it comes out.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just thinking about it from a career perspective. I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's you're downloading, you're doing your brain dump, and you're creating this AI extension of you. I'm not sure, it's really it's going to be a really interesting conversation of who owns that. But that's an interesting one on global talent. But you're also pinpointing another one that I hadn't thought of, which is actually the reverse, because we always think of offshoring. We think of the centers of gravity for the world's global multinationals, and then there's the regions, the geos, the people that get hired in the offshoring processes, right? And you're saying no, it's actually reverse. It's actually suddenly, because of AI, I can start a company and I could live in a relatively remote part of the world, or not, right? Or a geo part of the world, right? I mean, and I definitely, I'm speaking to you from a geo now, and I know you came from one, right? So we understand this concept of not being the center of gravity. And then you move. You moved, I moved. I mean, I used to work out of Palo Alto because you had to move. And now you're saying, no, I could actually start my company and then just hire into the US market or the North American market.
absolutely. And I mean, talent flows in all directions. Today, our Multiplier Global Exchange for Work is being used to access and participate in more than 120 countries. And obviously, your India, Philippines, and there are large centers where people hire. But you will see an accelerated shift on, because building product has become relatively easier or much easier than it used to be, and you are seeing an accelerated shift in hiring in markets that are very large homogeneous markets. You are the US, Canada, UK, Germany, France, Australia, and so on and so forth. And obviously your next frontiers would be your India, China, but I would still say they are slightly far away as when you talk about being able to sell into. But as far as talent density is concerned, your India, Philippines, your Africa, your Latin America, your Eastern Europe still remains a big chunk of, provides a big chunk of talent to this global economy.
Yep. Yep. So So if we fast forward this a few years, what do you think a normal workforce would look like?
That is a very, very interesting and difficult question. Uh, so Nirit, I get asked this often. Uh, because we run a company where our livelihoods and our aspirations depend on global exchange of work and how people and talent and companies and economies interact. So we are definitely at the intersection of and affected by how this would evolve in the future. We I've been thinking about it for a very long time because obviously we want to position ourselves correctly on the right side of the trends, and b, in general, how it would affect society. My personal view is, if you look back and you study all the revolutions that has happened in the history of mankind, we had the industry revolution, we have the information revolution, the internet revolution, and now we have the AI revolution. uh, Now let's go to the manufacturing revolution, the industrial revolution. All our forefathers used to be manufacturers at some point. Like, somebody was manufacturing clothes, somebody was manufacturing table, and so on and so forth. The smartest brains of that time perhaps were the most skilled manufacturers. And then you have industrial revolution, and the smartest brains of that time moved to a much larger problem. Right? Similarly, look at information revolution. The smartest brains in my generation, my colleagues, or the folks that I went to school with, last 10 years, they were busy making sure we don't abandon that cart on Shopify, or making sure we spend 2 more minutes on TikTok. So that's the smartest brains of last generation were spending on their time. Now, the thought process that says with AI you will see a large job loss, or you will see 40% of white collar jobs being wiped off, misses a very important point in life, that the challenges in life are not finite. The moment the smartest brains figure out a way to make themselves redundant, they move to a bigger challenge in life. And this is what has happened over time. So the smartest brains in my generation was busy at big tech, making sure we scroll on our phone, will now move to a much bigger challenge. And I personally feel so excited with AI, because it will lead to such large participation in global economy and global exchange for work, which you haven't seen any other revolution before.
So I love the way you just described it, but I have a challenge for you then. And I kind of, if you go through this history, the smartest brains, in order to do all those wonderful things, needed a lot of, I don't know if it's capital or capabilities, or just the sheer size of the big companies, and therefore they usually were employed. In today's world, I wonder if you can't create that billion-dollar company tackling this huge problem almost as an individual. So isn't AI giving the smartest brains the ability to go tackle the big problems without needing the company that hires them for it?
I'm 100% aligned with you. In fact, what I said and what you said are really perhaps the same side of the coin. It's not an either or. I genuinely think, in fact, it's complementary to each other. In fact, it's almost root cause to each other. Uh, I absolutely agree and think that there will be rise of micro enterprises in the future, where there'll be 1% billion-dollar companies.
Yeah.
And there's a very nice concept in life called an atom of work. What does an atom of work correspond to? In the most ideal scenario, if an individual wants to maximize their utilization, like as an individual, is the smartest person from MIT joining Google, are they maximizing their potential utilization? The answer is no, because per what they earn as salary versus revenue per employee of Google, there's vast difference which they are not getting to participate in. So ideally, that's the delta that they are living on the table by not providing Google that service as an enterprise, right? So I 100% align with you. In fact, I think that is the most likely outcome that's going to happen in the world, where you will see an explosion of micro enterprises, and these employees will go out, and you will see a lot more. I like to call it outsourcing, like that's the only English term I know, which is a lot of things that you're doing in-house, you will have a ready-made solution to use so that you can scale faster as a company, because everybody else is also providing a service as a company.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really a company as an ecosystem versus
Absolutely.
an employment method.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Wonderful. I've enjoyed this tremendously. And here's how I usually try to wrap, because we keep talking about where things were going, but I actually want to ask you for a question instead. So what do you think is the one question we should all be asking ourselves about the future of work?
I think it absolutely differs from whose lens we are looking at. So let me give you my perspective from lens of different stakeholders. As a talent, I will go back to the concept of maximizing my utilization. And utilization means my both revenue and cost as a talent, like a P&L of a talent. I should be indulging an exchange of work where I get the most value for my hours spent on my work. And then second is I should enjoy a lifestyle at the price that I want to. So what it translates to as a talent, you should be able to work for the company that you enjoy working for, that pays the most bang for the buck that you enjoy for, and live wherever you want without leaving your loved ones. When it comes to companies, it's important that no matter where I'm incorporated as a company or a business, does not determine what talent do I have access to, what opportunities do I have access to. You should be immersing yourself in this global exchange for work, because if you don't, you will be left behind because everybody else is. And as government, which is very, very important, you will realize, last night I was listening to the World Bank chief Ajay Bagga, and he was saying that every prime minister or president, the number one KPI for them, everybody has a KPI, they also have a KPI, is the number of jobs created. Number of jobs created is a metric, Nirit, can move governments, can change governments overnight. So number one factor for governments would be how strong or weak or favorable or unfavorable are their policies when they participate in this global exchange for work. For example, do you make it absolutely impossible to hire or fire talent in a country? You will not participate. You will have a handicap while participating in this global exchange for work.
Yeah.
So it's high time for governments, and you know what governments I'm talking about, where it's almost impossible to do business in.
Yeah. And it's actually interesting. That's clearly one of them. I also think, going with everything we talked about, because I don't think jobs are very limiting. Jobs in tracking the standard, even employment, people out of jobs and people looking for jobs. These are all metrics that only look at salaried employees and miss all the people. So they're going to miss that $1 billion the person with the $1 billion company, right? Because they're not employed. And so that's going to be really interesting to see how safety nets evolve around that and how government policy evolves to support that. Wonderful. Wow. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. For more about Sagar Khatri, check out the links in the episode description. Thank you so much. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow The Future of Less Work wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, your best people do not work because they have to. They do not work because you tell them to or you measure them on it. They work because they want to, because by working for you, they're doing what's important to them in life. Till next time.